During a space mission, disaster strikes when the space station is destroyed after an experiment goes wrong. Upon returning home, a woman discovers that things are no longer as they once were, even though everything appears unchanged. A woman drives down a highway at night with her young daughter Alice in the back seat. As they drive, they hear the voice of an unknown woman speaking Russian on the radio. Alice asks her mother, Jo, what the woman is saying, and Jo explains that the woman is saying the world has turned upside down. As they continue driving, a police car appears behind them, and an unknown object in the vehicle begins to blink. Jo is nervous but relieved when the police car passes by. Eventually, they arrive at a small cottage. Jo lights a fire, and Alice begins to listen to a bedtime story. With Alice distracted, Jo goes outside to check the device. She hears Alice scream and rushes back inside, only to find Alice asleep. She returns outside but hears Alice scream again, prompting her to run into the forest. 5 weeks earlier, Jo was assigned to a spacewalk with her astronaut colleagues. She communicated with Alice and her husband Magnus only via video calls. She showed Alice the ship while Captain Paul assembled a device following the instructions of scientist Henry Caldera on Earth. The device was supposed to detect a new state of matter, although no one knew what it was. Suddenly, something struck the ship, and the space station caught fire. All communication with Earth was lost. Amid the chaos, Paul's hand got trapped, and they decided to amputate it. One of the Soyuz ships was non-functional, so Jo went out to inspect the damage. She found severe damage to the power supply caused by the collision. The video connection to Jo was cut off, and only her voice could be heard. As Jo approached the second ship, she found the shriveled body of a female astronaut in an orange Soviet spacesuit. She realized that the body had crashed into the ship. She tried to grab it, but the body drifted away. Her partner brought her closer to the ship, and she reported what she had seen. Irina, the head of Roscosmos, heard about the dead woman. On Earth, the team worked to save Paul, but he suffered a cardiac arrest and died despite resuscitation efforts. The command center ordered 3 crew members to escape with Soyuz 2, while Jo stayed behind to repair Soyuz 1. Magnus and Alice were informed about the accident and Jo's situation in space. As the crew members were about to leave, one of them asked Jo to take care of Alice and Magnus. Meanwhile, Magnus and Alice were flown to Baikonur, Kazakhstan for further updates. Jo entered Soyuz 1, which was powered only by solar panels. After grabbing Alice's necklace, she noticed Paul's body strapped into the seat beside her. While waiting, she drew the body of the astronaut and sent it to the command center. Jo began to notice strange things, like time passing quickly. When morning came, she left the capsule to find the batteries she needed to repair the ship. She started the necessary repairs, determined to return home. Irina informed Henry that she had ordered the crew members to leave his device on board because it might have caused the accident, but he insisted that Jo retrieve it. Meanwhile, the crew members of Soyuz 2 landed safely and were welcomed back to Earth. Jo was informed that she needed to recover the experiment. Magnus and Alice arrived at the command center, but the connection was lost just as they were about to speak with Jo. Jo began hallucinating, seeing a cabinet with Alice's necklace, and panicking. In the present, Jo runs through the forest calling for Alice. She finds a similar cottage in the woods and enters, only to find a sick Alice in a cabinet. She carries Alice back to the original cottage, where Alice asks if she is a ghost. Jo takes care of Alice and prepares a hot bath for her. When she goes to boil more water, she sees the original Alice in bed and the new Alice in the bath, confusing her. She approaches the bath but finds no one in it. Alice suddenly appears behind her, but Jo realizes this is not the same Alice she saw in the bath earlier. Jo wakes up to find that she had passed out and lost hours. On Earth, Henry tells Irina that he had ordered rescue equipment for Soyuz 1, but Irina informs him that it may not be necessary as there were no signs of life. Jo continued repairing the escape capsule and recorded a message to send to her family. While recording, she heard a noise from the ship. She slowed down the recording and recognized a man's voice, which she identified as Paul's. The voice told her not to breathe. She went to check the ship and hallucinated that Paul was alive. She shook his hand, only to realize it was just his amputated arm. Jo managed to start the shuttle and heard a recorded message reminding her to hurry as time was running out. The message also reminded her to bring the experiment. Henry arranged a rescue mission for Jo but refused to talk about his twin brother when Irina asked him about it. Henry's twin brother Bud was on a ship on vacation and was being interviewed by a journalist about the spaceflight. The journalist pressured Bud to share his opinion, but he snapped at her when he realized she thought he was Henry. Jo managed to turn on the lights in Soyuz 1. She set the deorbit parameters for the shuttle's return after calculating them, retrieved the experimental device, and returned to the shuttle. She recorded a final message for her family and launched the ship. However, the automatic separation did not occur as it needed to be done from within the station. On Earth, everyone in the command center waited for the launch, which did not happen on time. They believed Jo was dead and prayed for her as Magnus and Alice mourned. However, a shadowy figure suddenly appeared and helped the shuttle separate, allowing Jo to return to Earth. She looked out the window and saw the shadowy figure in the ship as it detached the shuttle from its parts. She re-entered Earth's atmosphere but still had no contact with the command center. The command center was informed of Joe's re-entry into Earth's atmosphere and prepared to rescue her. Joe suddenly made contact with the command center, and they celebrated upon hearing her voice. Joe landed in a desolate area and managed to open the shuttle door. She was rescued by soldiers who helped her out of the ship and took her away. Joe was reunited with Alice and Magnus. Henry received the capsule and discovered something on the iPad. Joe was brought onto the helicopter where Alice and Magnus were sitting. She took Alice's hand, and for a moment Alice hallucinated that no one was in the shuttle while Joe experienced the same. When they snapped back to reality, Joe started speaking Swedish, which no one understood. She thought it was just stress and closed her eyes. In the present, Joe demands to know where Alice is, even though Alice is standing right in front of her. She leaves the cottage, takes all her belongings, and tells Alice they need to find the other Alice before she freezes. Joe and Alice set off through the snow, with Alice leaving a trail to avoid getting lost, and Joe scolds her for it. In the past, Joe eventually recovered from the spaceflight experiences. At a press conference, she expressed her condolences to Paul's family. She told the journalists about her experiences in space, and said she had missed Earth. Later, she spoke with Magnus about how difficult it had been to re-enter Earth's atmosphere. In the present, Joe and Alice head to a large cottage. They knock on the door, and a girl's little brother opens it. The girl tells Joe that the wall is collapsing and they cannot be separated. Alice runs away, and Joe follows her. Henry begins to believe that Joe might still be alive and works with Irina to save her. Henry tells Irina that Joe will come out of the shuttle once she remembers. However, Irina notices something strange when the woman on the radio says goodbye, and the radio contact cuts off. Joe and Alice head to a large cottage where an older woman lives. Joe tells the woman that she survived after falling out of the shuttle. However, the woman explains that it wasn't Joe, but another woman who fell out of the shuttle. The woman gives Joe a glass of water and shows her a video of the other woman. Joe realizes that it was her own mother who died in a similar incident years ago. Joe and Alice eventually meet a family living in another cottage. The family offers them a place to stay, but Joe declines, saying they need to find the other Alice. As they head out into the cold, Joe tells Alice to hold on, but Alice disappears. Joe is left alone and eventually returns to the cottage, where the other Alice is sitting with the family. Joe realizes that this is an alternate reality where she never returned to Earth. The ending remains open, as Joe sees a different version of herself in the mirror and wonders if she ever truly came home. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.